Connie Malamed is a renowned learning experience design consultant, mentor, author, and international speaker. Holds a graduate in instructional design and technology and an undergraduate degree in art education. I don't know if I actually knew that. That's fascinating. With over 20 years of experience in the field, she's the founder of the eLearning Coach website and podcast, where she shares strategies, content, product reviews, and resources related to learning, instructional design, and visual design. Malamed has authored two influential books, Visual Design Solutions, aimed at enhancing visual design skills for instructional materials, and Visual Language for Designers, which focuses on designing for the human mind. We doing okay so far, Connie?
I love that AI said they were influential, even if they weren't. Yeah, that's great.
She also founded the Mastering Instructional Design Community, a membership platform offering courses, live sessions, toolkits, and a forum to help individuals improve their instructional design skills and transition into the field. In addition to her writing and community building efforts, Malamed has been recognized with the Guildmaster Award for her contributions to the industry. She's active on social media, offering resources and engaging with the instructional design community through platforms like Twitter and Facebook. And I'm sure LinkedIn too. I do see you on LinkedIn, I believe.
Yeah.
All right. So excellent. Yeah, what'd you think of that bio? That work okay?
Yeah, I mean, kind of makes you sound better than you are. So yeah, what's not to like?
Excellent. All right, Connie. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over for accessibility for visual design. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to go ahead and just hide myself from the screen.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, or wherever you are on this planet. The way AirMeet works is I will actually be looking at PowerPoint, not a chat, but Luis will tell me if something, pretty important comes up. So thanks a lot for understanding that. One thing I wanted to tell you, since I always like to do things that are very practical, or usually like to, um, I made a resource so that you don't have to worry and get overwhelmed or overloaded by some of the things we'll be talking about. And you can get it on my site, the elearningcoach.com/accessibility. You don't even need to go there now. It'll be up there till August 7th. So you have a few weeks before you download it. Anyway, as learning professionals, to get started, you know that we have to anticipate and accommodate a diverse range of experiences and abilities that people have in our products. And and if some of you are educators, the same goes. But I'd like to check in on your mindset. In chat, on a scale of 1 to 5, how committed are you right now to improving the accessibility and inclusivity of your work? Luis, I'm going to need you to tell me on a scale of 1 to 5, where most people are at in terms of motivation. Just put one of those numbers in chat. How motivated are you?
I was seeing a lot of fives at first. Now we're getting some fours.
Mhm.
There's a five. Yeah. Let's
Okay.
see. Yeah. And
Well,
yeah, fives seem to be, yeah, it.
I can go back and forth between windows too. Forgot about that. I want you to know that I'm a 5. I just keep trying to learn as much as I can about this topic. And because I tend towards the visual design of things, it was just very natural for me to start researching and learning about how, in our regular visual design work, we can use little tricks and techniques to help make our products more accessible. Here's a great definition of visual accessibility. Uh, it ensures that people with varying degrees of visual ability can use websites, e-learning, and other digital information sources. That includes people who are colorblind, who have low vision, who are blind, who have sensitivity to light, cataracts, glaucoma, and other eye conditions. I noticed with myself, I've been wearing glasses since 6th grade, except for those rebellious years when I threw them away. Then I couldn't pass a driver's test, so I had to get them again. Maybe you did something similar. I noticed I'm really sensitive to contrast, and I have corrective glasses, but They don't seem to help with contrast. So it's just kind of interesting that many people have some kind of impairment, whether it's slight or extreme. We all have something. Even take a situation where you might break a leg or break a toe. We all have something where we're somewhat impaired. So, what we want to do, and I know this is one of the most caring fields I have ever seen, and I'm so glad so many people are motivated. What we want to do is take our work and make sure that people can learn, not just a few people, but we want to expand it to make our work as accessible to everyone. And that's what this whole conference is about. And every time we help someone with accessibility, we help everyone. For example, text to speech software helps anyone that's learning in a loud environment, not just people with visual impairments. High color contrast helps people with visual impairments, but it's also very helpful when glare is on your screen. During this session, I have tried as much as possible to rely on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, also known as WCAG or WCAG. They're published by the World Wide Web Consortium, which is the main international standards organization for the internet. And sometimes we have to tweak things and change the standards a little bit because we're working in a digital environment, but it's often in e-learning, not necessarily web pages. So you'll see throughout, I try to modify and adjust things for e-learning. The three key areas I think that we can focus on to improve accessibility are color, that's an pretty easy one, contrast, which gets somewhat involved, and alt text tags. So let's look at color first. Color perception depends on vision, light, and individual interpretation. The individual interpretation is so important. Have you ever been with someone and you say, "Oh, look at that green shirt," and someone says, "That's a gray shirt"? People see colors differently. That's one of the reasons colors, just working with colors, is so complex. Another reason it's complex is because colors are affected by the surrounding color. So this blue is exactly the same, but to many of you, the one on the left will look lighter because it's resting on a dark environment. And the one on the right will look darker to many people, maybe not everyone, because it's surrounded by a light color. So color is definitely complex. There is a phenomenon called color vision deficiency, which we call color blindness, which is the inability to distinguish between certain colors. I don't even know and can never remember the true medical term for this, so I'm just going to call it red-green. These are people who have difficulty distinguishing between red and green. It's the most common type of color vision deficiency. So if we just avoid using red, green as indicators of information, we're good. Blue, yellow is the second most common type of color deficiency. So there are some people who cannot distinguish between blue and yellow. And you know what? It's very rare for someone to not be able to see colors. So that's a little bit of a misnomer in the name color blindness. It really is only difficulty distinguishing between certain colors in most cases. So do you see a problem with this feedback to a question? Did you ever see on an e-learning screen somebody answers a question and then their feedback is green for correct and red for incorrect? What do you see as the problem here? I'm going to go over to chat and see what you're saying. Colors are used to distinguish the answers. That's right. Perfect. It would look the same. Yes, they both look gray. Possibly. They look kind of light brown. I'm going to show you what they look like in a simulator in a second. You can't distinguish between wrong and correct. So let me get back over there and show you what it looks like with a colorblind simulator, which you can find online. This is what it would look like to someone who has red-green color deficiency. So what would you do to correct this? What would you do to correct it? We can use a check mark and crosses to show correct and incorrect. Perfect. Yeah, a symbol for correct, check mark. You know, somebody asked what color simulator I used, and I am so sorry I can't remember, but a quick search will find one. Oh, it's in my resource document. I think it's actually Coblis, might have been the one. I can't remember for sure. Sorry. So everyone who said check mark, right? So easy. One thing that's really important that experts in this field of accessibility say is think about the accessibility and inclusivity at the start. Don't add this later because it's not going to be as good. So from the very start, when you start designing, start thinking about accessibility and inclusivity. Here's another example. This is a sentence with a blue link. Well, that's not going to work for everyone. All we have to do is underline it. Perfect. So that one was kind of easy. 2 important guidelines for accessible color. Avoid color combinations that are problematic for colorblind users. And avoid using color as the only visual means of conveying information or indicating an action. Anybody have anything they'd like to add to this? Better yet, maybe you can use the words correct and incorrect. Oh, that's a good idea too. So important to not use underline as a way of emphasizing. That's a really good point. Nowadays, underline means a link. Thank you for that. Give options for people to change color schemes. Excellent. I wonder if any authoring tools have that. Avoid using too much color in general, which can be distracting on a page. You know, I agree with that. You can keep your color palette pretty simple, and it works very well. Avoid highly saturated color for those of us with contrast issues and photosensitivity. Well, thank you for that. I don't think I knew about that. Be sensitive to color combinations, which can be distracting. Yeah, sometimes I'll see an e-learning course and I think I better put my sunglasses on. So great. I'm so glad you added those things. Excellent. Okay, now when we get to contrast, it gets a little bit technical. So if you need some coffee, go take a few sips right now. That's what I did. According to the WCAG guidelines, contrast is a measure of the difference in perceived luminance or brightness between two colors expressed as a ratio. And here's what that means. The lowest contrast is a ratio of 1:1. It's white text on a white background that no one can see. I don't even think Superman could see that. High contrast is 21:1. That's the maximum, and that's black on white. So now you have an idea of what's low and what's high, and this will help you understand the ratio. The WCAG standards say that we should make sure contrast is correct or is high enough and meets their standards for text, for images of text, and for our controls. And we don't often think about controls. So this is great stuff. Two of my favorite color checkers, contrast checkers, are WebAIM. You get that at webaim.org, and Adobe Color. And if you have a favorite contrast checker, why don't you add that in chat for other people to see? So let me get really practical here and tell you how to use a contrast checker if you haven't used one yet. The first thing you have to do is find out the hex code of the two colors you're using. Two colors are foreground, which would be the text or the controls, and the background. So the hex code are just a way to represent colors using 6 characters. You really don't have to understand it at a technical level to be able to achieve good color contrast. So what they do is they tell a digital display how much red, how much green, and how much blue to show. So whenever you're trying to find the hex code, you always want to find red, green, blue, or RGB colors. To find a hex code, you can look in every editing tool, graphic editing tool. The authoring tools have them, but I know there are many, many more authoring tools. Presentation tools allow you to do that. And there are extensions in your browser, a color picker, little dropper that allows you to find the hex code. So the hex codes are everywhere. You can easily find them. And I'm going to show you how to do this in PowerPoint. Let's say I'm wondering, I have this title screen. I wonder if the contrast is sufficient, would meet the standards. And there are 2 standards, AA and AAA. So what I'm going to do in PowerPoint is select more fill colors and then go to the RGB sliders and select a color. And there it is. It's that easy to find the hex color code. Once you get that hex color code, you're going to enter it into your contrast checker. However, you have to know if you're sticking to level 2 standards or level 3. So here's what the level 2 is, and it's the minimum. For normal text, the ratio should be 4.5 to 1. And the contrast checker will tell you what the ratio is and whether you passed. And for large text, it's 3 to 1. Now remember, the lowest level of contrast was 1 to 1. The highest level was 21 to 1. So it shouldn't be too hard to get there. Level AAA is more stringent. 7 to 1 for normal text, 4.5 to 1 for large text. Of course, I would encourage you to always go to the highest level, but you may work somewhere where they want you to have AA. You could still go to AAA though, actually. So here's how you do it. I found out using using PowerPoint that the green background had this hex code and the white text had this. I went to the WebAIM contrast checker, added the foreground color, that's the text color, and the background color. And I was pretty surprised because I thought that it had a good contrast ratio. So down here for normal text, and I was using large text, it failed. And AA passed for large text, which is 14-point bold or at a minimum 18-point. So there are a few things I could do. I could make it a little larger, make the text larger, and try it again, see if that works. Or I could, instead of, so there's an example of the text being larger. And that would probably pass for AAA. But there's something else you can do when you're in a contrast checker. There's a slider here. And when I used that slider, I found a darker background color. And look, it passed everything. So then I could just go back to my image and adjust the saturation in this case, or perhaps the brightness in my background. Now, if it was a solid background, that would be no problem. Just change the color of the rectangle. But if it's an image, you can fool around with your editing tool and get it to be darker. So that's how you use a contrast checker. So the guidelines are to use color contrast checkers to ensure your choices meet accessibility standards, because it's really hard to tell just with your eyes. And these are the standards for AA and AAA. But there's a little catch here, a word of caution. They have discovered that the algorithms in the contrast checkers, just to make things complicated, don't truly simulate human perception of luminance. And they're working on fixing this. So if something looks weird to you, for example, this failed a contrast checker text and this passed. And my eyes didn't agree with that. Or should I say my eyes and brain? My interpretation didn't agree with that. So if that's the case, and if you think your contrast checker is off, just go a little bit more extreme. Just make something larger, bolder, or your background darker. And then you can be sure, because every once in a while, that contrast checker is going to probably not be correct. And they say that WCAG3 should improve the accuracy of the contrast algorithm. So let me ask you, were you surprised? I don't even know if you can remember, but were you surprised that white and green failed? And do you have anything else to add or say about contrast? Okay, so somebody was saying the white was easier for them to read. That's true. Texture on the background affects visibility. That's a really good point. I'm pretty sure the webinars are recorded and will be available, right, Luis? Orange can be tricky to work with. Yeah, it can. And if it's too tricky, maybe you shouldn't work with it. Is there such a thing as too much contrast? I do not think so. Black on white is wonderful. So, oh, now let me just say this. I have heard from professional designers that they don't like to use white backgrounds in an auditorium where on slides in a large presentation space because it causes a shimmer. Now that's not exactly the same thing, but you may not want black on white in that situation. You might want it on light gray. Catherine says, I didn't know that changing the size and boldness of the text could impact contrast. That's really helpful. Yeah, I know. What about gradients? So one thing I'll recommend with gradients is you don't want to have too wide of a range because that's going to affect the contrast. So instead of going from dark blue to super light blue and then having white text on that, because at the end where it's kind of whitish or lightish, the contrast won't be good. Just go from dark blue to maybe medium and check that medium in a contrast checker. Someone says, here's a great case study on orange and black regarding the luminosity issue. Great. Wonderful. And you'll be able to find online, and I may have an article about that in the resources. I can't remember. I made them a while back, about how it's not quite, but they're not quite there in copying our perception for luminance or brightness in an algorithm, but they're working on improving it. Let's see. Jordan says, I would say, speaking from the point of view with light sensitivity, having less white background in technology decreases my eye strain. Thank you for that. I think a light gray is pretty nice. So that's really good. Yeah, F2 for white. Yep. Let's nerd out here. Thank you for your thoughtful, intelligent sharing. You know, you help everyone learn, including me. So thank you. All right. Well, we have one more. Can you take one more? I think I'll stay on chat and see. It's alt tags. Are you up for alt tags? Let me know in chat. Yes. Okay. We've got lots of thumbs up. Okay. Only nerds would be this excited about alt tags because I think they're quite complex. And I felt like the WCAG descriptions and categorization were quite helpful. So I'm only going to go through, I believe, 3 of them, but there are 5 categories, and I do have them in the resource. In that resource, I have all the categories and an explanation for them. So alt text, for those who don't know, describe non-text content, and there's usually a field, a little box, when you insert a picture that allows you to add the alt text. So it does benefit people with visual or cognitive impairments, but just like every other accessibility change that we make, it benefits everyone. It displays in browsers in place of the image if the file fails to load. And I know you've probably seen that. And most important, and you know, many people do not have great internet access, so it's quite helpful there. But where it really helps is that it benefits people who use screen readers. And I have a feeling we have a pretty sophisticated audience here that's experienced. But in case someone's in the audience and doesn't know what a screen reader is, that's perfectly okay. None of us knew what they were originally. It takes text written on the screen and it reads it aloud. Here's the key. It will also read the alt text description of images. And it will read buttons, links, and other controls. So it helps people who are blind or very visually impaired. It helps them be able to navigate a website. So it's really a wonderful tool, and there's a free one that you can download and try out. And it's so insightful to try that. Can somebody write the name of the free one? I think it's NVDA, but I can't remember if I have the acronym correct. So one of the first things you have to think about is, what is the purpose of an image? Because you might say, hey, this is a very fine alt tag, a person making bread. But if the purpose of the image is a digital page, an e-learning course that's teaching how to make bread, you might say a person wearing an apron kneading dough with both hands, because maybe that's step 5. And they really need to know it's going to be messy, so they're wearing an apron and they're kneading the dough with both hands. If you never have done kneading before, you would need to know that. So that's the difference between any old tag, any old description, and a description that's informative if it's supposed to be informative. Here's an example of where you can put alternate text in Storyline. And I know people use all kinds of authoring tools, all kinds of presentation tools, but I just wanted to let you know that it's pretty easy to find. You go in Storyline, you use size and position, click on size and position, and then you go to the accessibility tab. So the guidelines include these 5 different categories for alt tags. And this really helped me a lot because I was feeling quite confused about, when to write something, when to not write something. So these are the 5 categories, and we'll look at the first 3. I'll go over a quick review of 5 at the end, but they're also in that resource. The first one, and this is, I think, possibly what we use most of the time in instructional and training presentations and instructional e-learning. Informative images, they contribute to the meaning of a learning experience. You just write a short description that conveys the essential information. Here's an example. Probably everybody would write something a little bit different. A person pours motor oil into a funnel to fill the oil reservoir of a car. It doesn't really matter if it's a man or a woman in many cases, so I'm not mentioning that. Here's another one. Now you might say, oh, that's just a decorative image. That's not really informative. But I had to stop and think, well, the first bullet point is put yourself at the same height or lower than the child. So I would say that it's informative. Give your child time to speak, nod or make a sound. And notice with the alt text, an adult is bending down to be at the same height as a child while listening. No genders are mentioned, no ethnicity, racial attributes, none of that is mentioned. It's not important in this case. Sometimes it is important. So a second category is decorative images, and we certainly use them. We call them eye candy. If they don't intrude on the learning, I argue that they can make learning feel a little bit more motivational, because aesthetics, good aesthetics, pleasant aesthetics, can make people feel more like the learning experience is more enjoyable. I'm not saying to always use them, and I know they can be distracting. So decorative images enhance visual appeal, but they don't convey significant meaning to a learning experience. And this is key. If you give a decorative image a description, then a screen reader will read the description. And many times, if it's not informative, that's just auditory clutter. So what they've come up with is you use null alt text. And to do that, you enter a pair of quotation marks with no space, just like that. Not parentheses, just in that field, in that box, put 2 quotation marks with no space. That's called the null tag or the null alt text. And the screen reader knows to skip over that. Some screen readers will actually read the file name if you don't do that. So I've heard. I haven't seen one do that. What about backgrounds? We use a lot of background images. Do you think that should get a null tag? Or do you think you should describe it? You can answer in chat. Would you ever say decorative image so that the user knows that something is there? What a great question. Personally, I would not do that. I think that it's auditory clutter. It probably depends. The real thing, the real test, if you can find some users who are using a screen reader, you should ask them. Most people think that the no description is needed and that you would use a null tag. That's what I would do. Some of it is judgment. Know your users. I think it depends on what you're writing for them, but probably not. I mean, it's pretty safe to say it depends. I haven't come across a situation where a background image was that important, but it's possible. Okay, here's Sarah's rule. Read it left to right with the alt tag. Is to read it left to right with the alt tag. I'm not sure I understand that, Sarah. Can you explain it while I to everyone? Or maybe they understand and I don't. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm going to move on to functional images. And this is really interesting because in e-learning, we do something different than your typical web-based functional image some of the time. So images that are interactive elements like buttons and links, which are used to initiate actions, are functional images. So you want your alt text to convey the action the image will initiate. But here's something I'm adding. If the image is important, include a brief description. So in the case of search, a magnifying glass to indicate search, I would just say search button. However, here's an e-learning course where she is a button. Mia is a button, and it's about sales, meeting sales objections. So here's what I would write. Button Mia is a customer who has her arms crossed and appears to be resistant. Click Mia to respond to her objections. So I don't know if you agree. This is not WCAG, but this is what I would do because I would want the learner to know that this isn't just a button. This is a customer who's looking like, I don't know if I really believe you or want this brand. So I think that we should describe that. In the resource, I have this chart that explains what to do with every type of image. Quickly with text, screen readers can't read graphic text, so you have to write exactly what the text says. And complex images are somewhat complex. You have to make two different parts. You have to present people with an alt text version and a link to a long description. That means if you have a graph, you have to give users who are using a screen reader or who can't see the screen all of the information in another way. Real quickly, these are the 4 questions that you want to stop and think about when you're writing alt text. And I'd love to see what you have to say. I'm going to go back to the tab about alt text. Oh, quick, be descriptive. You know, stop and think about if you couldn't see the image, what's the meaning and purpose? Be concise. They recommend, but there's no limit, 125 characters or less. Don't forget to use that null tag and avoid repetition. I thought this was pretty interesting. Never start with a graphic of because the screen reader says that or an image of. Okay, here's my contact information. It's also in that resource at the end. Let me get back to you now and see, what are you saying? Let me see what we're saying in chat. Would we say click Mia or select Mia? That's a great question. My understanding is click if you want someone to use it as a button. Okay. Kayleen is saying that you don't have to identify it as a button because Storyline will do that. I guess that's probably true. Would we say click Mia? So we've got that one. I've been using the word select rather than click as not all have use of a mouse. Oh, that's a really good point. You can also, sometimes in Storyline, I know you can say, it will say tap or click. If you're looking at something on a phone. Yeah, that's true. What's wrong there? Yeah, there's so many different input devices. Well, thank you, everyone. Can you go back to the slide with the questions you should ask? Sure, I did kind of run through that ridiculously quickly. Here we go. I'll leave that up for a couple minutes. Thank you so much, everyone. It was wonderful to hang out with you. Great audience, great questions. You had a lot of good information I learned during the session too.
Hey, Connie, do you have a few questions in QA? Do you have a minute?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So let's see. A few people asked about whether or not the session is recorded. Yes, it is recorded. And right after this session completes, it takes, I don't know, maybe a minute, maybe in less than a minute for
Wow.
AirMe to format it, and then it's available for viewing. So feel free to come back, even if you want to come back later in the week or next week. I'll have these up for a while. I will have like a separate recording available on another website for on the TLDC website, so you can access it there too. I also post these on YouTube because I want these particular recordings to get out to as many folks as possible. So you'll be able to access these in a variety of different ways. Let's see here. I'm not, did you answer this one? Let's see. Jessica was asking, I struggle the most with alt text when there's a character limit. Do you have any tips?
Hmm. The only tip I can think of is perhaps try to run it through one of the AI tools and ask how you can slim it down. Say I need to shorten this to X number of characters. That's what I would do.
Yeah, and that works too. I will often do that. I will actually take an image if I'm struggling a little bit, especially I will run it through ChatGPT or something and upload the actual image and ask for help that way. And
Yeah.
that's been good for me. Let's see here. Are we getting this PowerPoint later? Gabriella is asking.
I did summarize everything in that resource, but what I can do is also make a PDF version of it so that you can get it. So that works.
Okay, great. And let's see. Gabrielle is asking, what color simulator did you use? I don't recall if you had answered that one
I said I
earlier.
wasn't sure. I think there may be one by Coblis,
That's right.
Coblis, and I believe that's in the resource.
Excellent. Okay. And then let's see. We have one other question here. Oh, this one's from Alicia about alt text and graphics. Do you have any resources for alt text and graphics, data charts, etc.? I know you talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, the WK guidelines, so this is where I got it from. So you actually put in there are two parts to it. In the alt text, you describe it like this is a graph that shows income disparities in the United States. And then you put a link to where the data is. Find data in with a link. Then the user can click on that link, and then you should have the link in, I believe, the text. I believe in a some format that a screen reader can read, and I think that's an HTML table, but I could be wrong. There are graphs, so you have to. In other words, you have to give people the whole goal is to give someone a similar experience if they can't see it. So they need that data and you want to give it to them in some form.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you.
It's interesting. Let's see. Somebody has a great. Thank you for that. People are so helpful.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, one more question in QA. In tools like Storyline, do you have a preference between embedding labels within images and then adding them to the alt text and adding labels separately in text boxes? I know this helps in
Mm.
translation.
I don't know the answer to that. I basically try as much as possible to avoid that's the recommendation, to avoid graphic text. But I understand why you might have it. You could be showing parts of a diagram and you have graphic text in there. But I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
No problem. If anybody has any helpful
Yes.
replies to that one in chat, see, Clea, aim for tweet length before they ruin tweet.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's very good.
All right. Excellent. And we've got some resources being posted. This is great. All right. Well, let's see. Any other questions in Q&A? I'm just keeping an eye on this to see if anyone adds any more. It doesn't look like any more coming into Q&A.
Thank you,
Um,
Karen.
yes, lovely. Connie, I am always so happy whenever you participate in one of our TLDC events. Um, we're just honored to have you. I'm glad that you were able to open this one for us,
Sure.
and everybody, go to Connie's website. Take advantage of those resources that resource that I posted, that I pinned to the top of chat. And Connie has a community. If you're interested in participating in that, please check it out. Connie's definitely somebody that you should be connected with, and be subscribed to, eh, everything that she does. So, Connie, thank you.
Well, thank you for putting this on for free for everyone. It's just
Mhm.
wonderful. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Connie. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take
All right.
care.
Thanks, everybody. We have coming up at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I guess that's 1 p.m. Eastern. We've got Kayleen is coming back to for our next session today: accommodating neurodivergent learners, strategies for inclusive learning design and facilitation. Please come back for that one.
Good.
Kayleen is always absolutely wonderful. And with
Take
that,
care.
I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.